You're watching HQ Spotlight on CBS Sports Network. College football is going to be here before we know it, and we still have some questions for some teams for the 2025 season, including Alabama. It is year 2 for Kalen DeBoer, coming off a 9-win season, which for most teams and fan bases would be like kind of acceptable, but if you're the Crimson Tide, it is not. They missed the CFP. That is not a situation they're used to being in, especially after seeing Nick Saban and all of his success prior to the Kalen DeBoer era. But if we had any sort of questions about the quarterback situation at Bama, their OC Ryan Grubb is clearing it all up. Take a listen.
Right now, we're keeping status quo. All the guys have been getting 1s, 2s, and 3s, with the exception of Ty. He's the only guy that's not taking any 3 reps. So really, it's been status quo. But today, everybody got a couple racks with the 1s, and Ty took a couple with the 2s. So we're still moving them around, and the guys know that. There's a pretty clean picture moving forward throughout the week.
Let's welcome in our college football analyst, Tom Fornelli, here to walk us through some of the teams that we're still wondering about, right? Starting with Alabama. So what are some of the biggest questions that you have, Tom, as it pertains to the Crimson Tide?
I do think it's 2 questions. In part, what we just heard Ryan Grubb talking about is who will the starting quarterback be? And I think if you read between the lines, he said everybody's getting reps with the 1s, 2s, and 3s. Except for Ty Simpson. He's not getting reps with the 3s. Now, why is that? It's kind of one of those, I wonder what's going on moments. I think Ty Simpson is your favorite to win the job, but what I think is the bigger question is Ryan Grubb wasn't at Alabama at all last season. When Kalen DeBoer came from Washington, he did not bring the offensive coordinator he had with the Huskies that helped lead them to the title game with him. Now Grubb is coming in, and you're wondering, can he be that kind of secret ingredient, maybe the missing spice from what Alabama's offense had last year, and bring the same kind of success we saw them have together at Washington with Michael Penix and that trio of receivers they had? Because when you look at this offensive personnel, I know we give Jeremiah Smith, the Ohio State wide receiver, plenty of love and attention, and deservedly so, but Ryan Williams is also one of the best wide receivers in the country who balled out last year as a freshman, and he flies a bit under the radar. So if they could bring in Ty Simpson or whoever else it ends up being as the starter and bring a little bit more of a passing dynamic to this offense that just really wasn't there the last couple of years under Jalen Milroe, who was very much a runner more than he was a passer, although he did get better passing as his career progressed. But still, Alabama wasn't really the two-way threat offensively that I think you need to be in this modern era of college football with an expanded playoff field to win a national title. So can Ryan Grubb bring that running and passing dynamism back to the Alabama offense to help them get back to an elite level?
You know what, in the last, 10 years or so, when we're talking about Bama, it's like a dynasty and all of this success. And then recently it's shifted to, okay, is Kirby Smart in Georgia maybe like the next Alabama, right? And they're figuring out life without Carson Beck, no longer the quarterback. He's with the U. But what are you still wondering about the Georgia Bulldogs, Tom?
This might get taken out of context and go the wrong way amongst Georgia fans, but what I'm wondering is, has Georgia peaked as a program? Not saying that they're not going to compete for national titles anymore. They won't be one of the best programs in the country. But when you look at the shifting landscape of the sport, this is a team that won 2 titles in a row, and then the last 2 seasons has failed to reach the playoff altogether. So you look at what's happened and you ask, why? Why is Georgia kind of, quote-unquote, falling off a bit? Oh, I'm sorry. They did make the playoffs last year. I meant the Final Four when it was still 4 teams, but they didn't win a playoff game last season. But the thing is, when you look at the transfer portal and NIL, what helped make Alabama such an incredible dynasty under Nick Saban and what Georgia's blueprint was following was, with their high school recruiting chops, they were able to just absolutely hoard talent. So that way their second and their third string on their depth chart was often better than the first stringers of a lot of the teams they were facing. But with the transfer portal now allowing players to leave without having the punishment of sitting out a year, those guys who might be sitting there second and third on the depth chart or waiting for their turn to get a start aren't as patient waiting for their turn. They're leaving. They're spreading out. So that way, when you do suffer injuries like we saw Georgia do along the lines of scrimmage last season, they don't have the replacements ready to come in to compete at the same level like they did only a few years ago. So it will be interesting to see, because when you look at the transfer portal for Georgia, they still do an incredible job recruiting the high school level. I would argue that they and Ohio State are the 2 best in the country at doing so. But when it comes to the portal, they're losing far more players than they're bringing in to supplement. And you do wonder if maybe in the future, if Kirby needs to get a little more aggressive in the portal to address some holes on their roster. But at the same time, how attractive is it going to be for a kid in the portal to go to Georgia where he can't be 100% certain he's going to start?
Yeah, the next man up mentality. We always talk about it, right? And there's a certain team that I feel like is going to have to be diving right into that, and we're considering injuries, right? And normally, Tom, I would create some like chip on my shoulder and really get riled up here. But when I'm looking at this, DJ Lagway, I'm trying to I'm down deep in rabbit holes trying to figure out what's going on with him with all those injuries. Now I'm hearing the Dallas Wilson news, so on and so forth. Tom, I have my own questions, as I know you do as well.
Yeah, it's not good looking, Jacqueline, like with everybody out and hurt. Like, I understand it's still August, so we're not playing games yet. But still, these are valuable reps that you're missing out on. And while we don't know the full extent of all these receiver injuries or how long they're going to be out, nor do we know the full extent of DJ Lagway's myriad injuries, it is a concern because if you look at Florida last season, they were at their best when DJ Lagway was playing. But he had problems staying healthy, and he missed a lot of time because of it. And now in the offseason, he is continuing to have problems staying healthy. He's been banged up the entire offseason, and you go into the season, and what's the one caveat you hear when we discuss Florida and their possibilities in 2025? Every single time it's, if DJ Lagway stays healthy and plays great, this is a team that could surprise a lot of people. They could compete for an SEC title. They could be a playoff team. But that if DJ Lagway stays healthy part has so far proven he can't stay healthy. He hasn't shown the ability to do so. So until you see him out there every single week starting and playing for the Gators, it's very hard to fully buy in. And then you add on the other injuries that they're now suffering at wide receiver, and it just gets a little sketchier every single day. It's like the Gators could really use some good injury news. If we could just get 1 week without a guy being lost for a little bit of time, that'd be great.
You know what? I was on Swamp 247 on their X account because, of course, I was during the show, and I feel like I was looking for some glass half full. Somebody was talking about. Yeah, somebody was talking about oh, there's actually progress for DJ Lagway. I got to go back and find that article because I need a little something, Tom, especially because the schedule is certainly not any easier. It's just as bad, if not worse. All right, let's go over to the Big Ten because a lot of our analysts are very, very high on Penn State, right? They're saying if there is a year for Penn State to run the table and win it all, it's probably when Ohio State has a bit of a roster turnover, Oregon breaking in a new quarterback. They have their quarterback back in Drew Allar, one of only 5 Big Ten teams that are bringing back the QB from the previous season. But you still have some questions, Tom.
Yeah, I need to know if Drew Allar's ready to step up when it matters most, because the one reason that everybody's so high on Penn State is we're doing a segment here about all these big questions facing these big programs. Never in the recent history that I can remember have so many of the elite top programs in the country had so many question marks surrounding them. Penn State doesn't have nearly as many question marks because they get nearly the entirety of their team that reached the semifinals of college football playoff back. But one of those guys is Drew Allar, and if you look a little closer last year, this is a team that lost to Ohio State in the regular season. Now, when you look at their performances against Oregon and in their playoff games, Drew Allar's performance fell off a cliff. He completed only 54% of his passes in those 5 games for 6 yards per attempt, and half of the 8 interceptions he threw on the season came in those games. So we have seen Drew perform really well against teams that Penn State is just much better than. When it's come to facing other elite competition, now he's not alone here. Lots of teams struggle more when they're playing other elite teams. But the gap between Drew against everybody else and Drew against the elite is wider than you see in most places, at least for a team that you're trying to compete for a national title with. So coming back as a starter, you're hoping that we could see the development and the progress in his game to where he could take that next level. Because if he doesn't, I don't care how many people Penn State have coming back from last year's team. They're not going to get any further than they did last year unless Drew Allar is capable of taking them there.
And you guys saw the schedule there. They open up the season against Nevada. The last time I looked, they were favored by 45.5. I thought it was the total that we were putting up there on the graphic at first check, but I'll have to go back and see if that number's gone up or down. Let's go over to Notre Dame because, Tom, there are also questions about the quarterback position, albeit it's a very, very different situation than the one that we're dealing with at Penn State.
Yeah, it's the CJ Carr, Kenny Minchey question. Who is going to be the starting quarterback for the Fighting Irish? And I think, just based on reading between the lines and the tea leaves and what you hear, I think CJ Carr is the favorite, but I do not think it's a runaway, favorite kind of situation. But it's kind of like what we discussed with Alabama earlier in the segment. Like last year, Notre Dame was phenomenal. They had a great offensive line. They were phenomenal defensively. And with Riley Leonard, they had a battering ram tank of a quarterback that was able to give them one of the best ground games in the country, along with Jeremiah Love and their other backs. CJ Carr is a different player. He's 6'3", he's 210 pounds, and he can throw, which is something that Riley Leonard was never exactly great at doing. He was a running quarterback who threw sometimes when you needed him. If CJ Carr can step in there and give them more of a passing element to their offense, because Notre Dame has talent at wide receiver. You just never saw it last year because Riley Leonard wasn't really capable of utilizing it with his arm. If they can add that dynamic to their offense, this becomes a team that was already very good and is going to be very good again. But now if they're able to move the ball down the field vertically, I don't know how many teams on their schedule will be capable of stopping them during the regular season. So depending on who wins this starting quarterback job, if they can bring a passing attack to South Bend, look out. The Irish are going to be really good.
All right, and finally, we are capping this off with FSU. 2 wins in 2024. You have to think it's only up from here. Mike Norvell, he's like real amped up at the podium at ACC Media Days. Their quarterback is like talking trash ahead of the season opener against Bama. I feel like there are a lot of questions for the Seminoles, but what is the most glaringly obvious one to you, Tom?
How long can we keep up with this charade? Honestly, like you mentioned that Mike Norvell's being all pumped up at media days. He was pumped up at media days last year, too. It's the same stump speech you hear from Mike Norvell over and over again. And listen, there has never been a greater injustice in the history of the college football playoff than what happened to Florida State a couple of years ago. But then what came last season kind of really made you forget all about it because they were horrible last offseason. They brought in DJ Uiagalelei, which proved to be a huge mistake. And now to answer that, they go get a new quarterback and they go get Thomas Castellanos from Boston College and they bring in Gus Malzahn as offensive coordinator. Now, Thomas Castellanos is a very good fit for what Gus Malzahn wants to do on offense because Gus Malzahn doesn't like throwing the football. He just wants a quarterback who is basically a running back, and they're a one-dimensional team. That could take you places when your quarterback is Cam Newton. Thomas Castellanos is not Cam Newton. So if you're Florida State coming off a 2-win season and you're sitting there going into 2025 just saying, hey, I hope we can get back to a bowl game or 7-5, you're Florida State. You're supposed to be competing for ACC titles and national titles, not bowl games. If you ask any Seminoles fan around, the only reason Mike Norvell is still the head coach is because of his buyout. So are we just going to have to deal with this for another year before they make a change, or will we actually see progress? I'm leaning towards the former.
I'm being told we have Danny Cannell who wants to chime in. So here he is.
Yeah, we do. Oh, yeah, we do. I mean, I got to sit here and listen to this blasphemy being spewed about my alma mater and how they're on the downfall. Do we forget they ran the table just 2 seasons ago and got screwed out of the playoffs? Like, are we forgetting that happened? It wasn't a decade ago. And I got to listen to Jacqueline, who's too busy scrolling through the Gator Chomp 24/7 site or whatever it is. You two out here just bashing my squad. I mean, come on. Somebody's got to look at some level-headed aspect of the Seminoles here. Come on, Tom.
So you're allowed to be all amped up about FSU, and I can't be on Swamp 247. By the way, get it right, Danny.
We'll see. We'll let the field. We'll see what happens when the August 30th comes, and we'll see what happens when the season unfolds. By the way, just to make clear, I'm not getting too cocky. I was on the under on our win total pod, but I think we're going to see great improvement. We're going to see great improvement from last year, though.
Come on, December 15th bowl game. Go Noles.
Sorry for the dramatic pause, Tom, but I felt it was warranted if we were just going to surprise you with Danny commenting on the Seminoles. You can hear the guys on the Cover 3 podcast always breaking down the latest headlines in college football. You can watch right now by scanning that QR code on your screen.